You ever notice how the more desperately you want something, the more it slips away? Love, success, peace. It's strange. The harder you chase life, the faster life seems to run from you. Most people believe success comes from pushing harder, so they force themselves forward. More work, more stress, less sleep. And somehow, life only becomes heavier, because effort isn't always the problem. Desperation is. And desperation changes the way you think, the way you behave, even the energy people feel around you. Have you ever waited for someone's message, checking your phone every few minutes, pretending not to care, while secretly panicking inside? That's the reverse effect. The harder you force confidence, the more unnatural you become. And people notice it instantly. At some point, trying stops feeling motivating and starts feeling exhausting. You wake up tired. You overthink everything. And your mind never truly rests anymore. The strange part is, people can actually feel desperation, not through your words, but through your energy. The need for approval, the fear of rejection, the pressure hiding inside you. That's why the harder you try to sleep, the more awake you become. The harder you try to relax, the more anxious your brain feels. Because pressure turns simple moments into emotional battles. And eventually, you stop enjoying life itself. Everything becomes performance. You're no longer living naturally. You're constantly trying to prove that you're enough. But maybe the answer was never to force life. Maybe peace begins the moment you stop chasing everything so hard. And maybe the people who look the most confident are simply the ones no longer trying to impress anyone. Most people aren't exhausted because life is hard. They're exhausted because they're constantly fighting reality, trying to control everything, trying to be perfect, trying to never fail. And that pressure slowly destroys them from the inside. Even self-improvement can become toxic when it comes from self-hatred, because no amount of success will ever feel enough. If deep down you believe you're not enough already, the reverse effect works in almost every part of life. The harder you force happiness, the less natural it feels. The harder you chase attention, the more invisible you become. And the harder you force love, the faster it disappears. Because life responds differently when you stop approaching everything from fear. Confidence doesn't come from forcing yourself to look strong. It comes from finally feeling okay, even if things don't go perfectly. Maybe peace was never something you had to chase. Maybe it appears the moment you stop running after everything. And maybe the strongest people in the world are simply the ones who no longer need to prove their worth. For most of your life, you've probably believed one thing: if I just try harder, everything will finally work. But nobody tells you there's a difference between effort and emotional desperation. Healthy effort feels focused. Desperation feels fearful. One comes from purpose. The other comes from the terrifying feeling that you're falling behind everyone else. Social media made this even worse. Now, every second, your brain compares your life to someone else's highlight reel, their money, their relationship, their confidence. And slowly, you begin to feel like you're never enough. And the more pressure you feel, the more unnatural you become. You start overthinking conversations, overanalyzing text messages. Even small moments begin feeling like life or death situations. But the moment you stop forcing everything, something strange happens. Your mind becomes quieter. Your body relaxes. And for the first time in a long time, you begin to feel present again. Sometimes, you don't even realize how tense you've become. Your shoulders stay tight. Your thoughts never slow down. Your brain keeps preparing for problems that don't even exist yet. And eventually, stress becomes your normal state. The human mind was never designed to live under constant pressure. But modern life teaches you to hustle endlessly, to always optimize, always improve, always chase more. And that endless chase quietly destroys your peace. You know what's ironic? The people who desperately chase confidence usually feel the least confident inside. Because real confidence doesn't come from proving yourself constantly. It comes from finally accepting yourself. And maybe that's the real secret. The less desperately you need something, the more naturally it comes to you. Because calm people think clearly. Calm people act naturally. And natural energy feels powerful. Maybe life was never supposed to feel like a constant competition. Maybe you were never meant to carry this much pressure every single day. And maybe the moment you stop forcing life is the moment life finally starts flowing again. Most people spend their entire lives trying to become someone worthy of love, someone worthy of respect, someone worthy of success. But what if you were already enough before any of it? Modern life constantly whispers one message into your brain: You need more money, more status, more attention, more achievement. And because of that, people forget how to simply exist peacefully. You weren't meant to live every day in survival mode. Constant pressure changes people. It makes them anxious, emotionally numb, disconnected from themselves. And eventually, they forget what calm even feels like. And maybe that's why silence feels uncomfortable now. Because the moment everything becomes quiet, your mind finally hears the pressure you've been carrying all along. But healing begins the moment you stop fighting yourself. Not when life becomes perfect. Not when you finally impress everyone. But when you realize you no longer need to earn your worth. For the first time in a long time, you stop asking, what do I need to become? And start asking, why was I never enough to myself? The truth is, life becomes lighter when your identity is no longer attached to constant achievement. Because peace doesn't come from winning every moment. It comes from finally allowing yourself to breathe. You don't have to prove your worth every second. You don't have to win every argument, impress every person, or constantly appear successful. That pressure was never meant to be your identity. Some people spend years chasing validation without realizing the people they're trying to impress are just as insecure as they are. Maybe the strongest version of you was never the one forcing everything. Maybe it was always the calmer version, the one who no longer panics over every outcome, the one finally learning how to let life flow naturally. The reverse effect changes everything once you finally understand it, because forcing life only creates resistance. But calmness creates clarity. When your mind finally slows down, you begin noticing things again. The sound of rain, the feeling of breathing, the quiet moments you used to rush past without seeing. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't try to prove anything. And maybe that's why so many people overlook it. Healing begins quietly, not with some dramatic moment, but with tiny decisions. To stop comparing, to stop forcing, to stop treating yourself like you're constantly behind in life. Maybe life was never meant to be controlled. Maybe it was meant to be experienced. And maybe the moment you stop trying so hard is the exact moment life finally starts feeling real again. For years, you thought pressure would make you stronger, but pressure without peace only makes people emotionally tired. And eventually, even success stops feeling meaningful. The calmest people aren't calm because life is easy. They're calm because they stopped fighting every little thing. They stopped needing control, stopped needing validation, stopped turning life into a constant competition. Most of the suffering in your mind comes from resisting reality, wanting life to happen faster, wanting people to behave differently, wanting yourself to already be perfect. And resistance creates pain. But acceptance creates freedom, not weakness. Freedom. Because when you stop fearing every outcome, life stops controlling you emotionally. Maybe happiness was never hiding in achievement. Maybe it was hiding inside the moments you were too distracted to notice. The quiet mornings, the deep breaths, the moments when you finally stopped rushing through life. For the first time, your mind stops racing. You stop trying to control every future outcome. And suddenly, life feels softer. Not because your problems disappeared, but because you finally stopped fighting yourself. And strangely, the less desperate you become, the more naturally people connect with you. Because calm energy feels safe, and people are drawn towards safety. The reverse effect exists everywhere. The harder you force creativity, the more blocked your mind becomes. The harder you force love, the colder relationships feel. And the harder you force happiness, the more empty life becomes. Maybe life was never asking you to become perfect. Maybe it was simply asking you to be present, to slow down, to stop turning every moment into pressure. And maybe the moment you stop trying so hard to become someone else is the moment you finally come back to yourself. Because peace was never waiting at the finish line. It was always here. Hidden beneath the pressure. Most people spend their entire lives running toward peace without realizing the running itself is what keeps them from feeling it. You don't need to rush your healing. You don't need to prove your value every day. And you don't need to become perfect to deserve peace. Maybe the strongest thing you can do is stop constantly consuming noise, the comparisons, the pressure, the endless need to keep up, and simply allow yourself to exist. Because life feels different when you stop treating every moment like a test, when you stop measuring your worth through productivity, attention, or achievement. And finally remember, you're a human being, not a machine. And maybe the secret to life was never about trying harder. Maybe it was learning when to let go, when to slow down, and when to trust life enough to stop forcing every single step. The moment you stop chasing approval, you begin hearing your own thoughts again. Not the world's expectations, not social media noise, just you. And strangely, that silence starts feeling beautiful. You realize you were never behind in life. You were just exhausted. Exhausted from comparing. Exhausted from forcing. Exhausted from carrying pressure that was never truly yours. Healing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like resting without guilt, saying no without fear, breathing deeply without feeling like you're wasting time. Maybe peace was never something you had to earn. Maybe it was always inside you, buried underneath fear, pressure, and the endless need to become someone else. So maybe the answer was never to try harder. Maybe the answer was learning how to stop fighting yourself, how to slow down, how to breathe, and how to finally understand that your worth was never something you needed to prove. Maybe someone out there needed this reminder today that you don't have to earn your worth by destroying your peace. If this video spoke to you, leave a comment saying, "I choose peace," and subscribe for more psychology documentaries that make you understand yourself a little deeper.